Greetings and welcome to Let's Talk About Books, baby, where we talk with your favorite LGBTQ plus authors. I'm Anita Kelly, and my great guest today is none other than Radclyffe. Hello, Rad.
Hi, Anita. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and listening tonight or this evening, wherever you might be.
Yes, thank you for being on the show. It's wonderful to see you and talk with you. Our listeners can't see you, but maybe one day I'll switch that up. Um,
Then I
so
won't be able to do it in my pajamas, but okay.
oh darn. And Rad has cowboy pajamas, folks.
Yeah.
So all right. So Rad, let's jump right in and talk about your new release. It's coming out in May of 2024, and it is under your other pseudonym of LL Rand, and it's called Primal Hunt. And so I think this is all part of the Midnight Hunt series, right?
That is correct. This is, I think, maybe number 8.
Wow.
I actually haven't counted, but I believe that's true because I did a 2-volume anthology right before this one that were actually two 36,000 words novellas that came out together as a group, Rogue Hunt and Enchanted Hunt. So
Okay.
I think counting those, I think this is number 8.
Wow, that's incredible. That's great. When did you
Yeah.
start that series? What year? Do you remember?
I think the first one was 2008, a lot earlier than I thought, actually, when I looked back at them. The first one was The Midnight Hunter,
Okay, I remember that one.
and then Blood Hunt, and I can't do them all in order, so I'll quit with those two. But
Okay. So what is Primal Hunters? Is it Primal Hunt? Primal Hunt.
Primal Hunt. Um, Primal Hunt was really fun for me to write because it was a real expansion of the world. Ordinarily, in this particular series, not every series, but in this particular series, I have tried to carry the core 2 or 3 couples from book 1 and book 2 forward through all the books because they tended to be the most popular or the most recognizable in terms of genre. We had werewolf, we had a human who was turned, we had a vampire, we had a human who was partnered with her, and they were very popular characters. And there were many secondary characters who were also popular. But I've tried to carry the core characters forward. And in this particular book, I've brought many of the central characters from the previous novels together, and we had a giant battle in Fairy. So that is the premise for the story, that something big is happening in a new world that I haven't written as much about. And I brought all the characters through the veil into Fairy, and it was great fun because I got to create an entirely new world out of my imagination. So that was a lot of fun for this particular volume.
Fairy and war just
Yeah.
don't seem synonymous.
Oh, but it's true though, because the Fae are actually very warlike creatures. I mean, I think when we think about fairies, we think about Peter Pan or Tinkerbell or small beings, but in fact, that's generally not true. The Fae are a very varied world, and there's good and there's evil, although all of the Fae tend to be I won't say manipulative, but particularly clever. They live forever, which means beings who live forever tend to get kind of bored. So games in the smaller and greater sphere tend to be popular among the Fae. So that makes them interesting characters to create because they're very multidimensional and they play a very long game. So it's much
Game
fun.
games as in head games or board games, head games?
No, games as in the games of power, the games of politics,
Okay.
the games of love, whatever that may be. Nothing is ever quite as it seems.
And are they mischievous?
Some can be. I
Okay.
mean, I think that some of the mythological beings, like leprechauns, for example,
Mm,
are frequently thought of as being very mischievous. Brownies, for
yeah.
example, also. But the Fae that I write about tend to be more warrior-like. And certainly the Fae in my books tend to be more sexual. So that they're the Queen of Fairies, Cecilia, for example, is very sexual, very powerful. And in this particular book, her throne is at risk. And that's really the premise of the story. Will her allies, who are not always her allies, but sometimes her enemies, come to her aid?
Okay. And is the Wolf Clan, are they her allies?
Both the wares and the vampires.
Oh, great.
Because, back in my other books,
Yeah.
there's basically an alliance of power in the human world. The wares and the vampires, the other superhuman characters. I won't say superhuman because that's not really true. Other characters who are non-human powers are allied. So there's a war council, and everyone decides should we or shouldn't we go to Cecilia's aid.
Wow. Awesome. I can't wait to read it.
It was a lot of fun. I hope people enjoy it.
Oh, I'm sure they will. Your other Midnight Hunt books were awesome. I have only read yours, and now I forget it. She's one of your authors. I think she might be Irish. She wrote like
Jenny Frame.
No, not Jenny
Has
Frame.
written a whole werewolf series, a were and vampire series.
Yeah.
So Hunger for You, Living for You. Um, um, Jessica Pennington has also written a whole were series. So
Yeah.
you.
Not her. It'll come to me.
Okay. Yeah.
She's been with you for a long time. She was with you way back. Um, but anyway,
Oh, there's a lot,
yeah.
most of the authors that were there at the beginning are still here, which I'm happy to say.
Yeah, that is fantastic.
Yeah.
That just really,
Allie and Gunn and Ronnie Black and
yeah,
Baldwin. Kim is
speaks
still
well
around.
to what you do, really, and how you operate.
Well, it's really nice for me. I think I probably have mentioned to you this is year 20. And the very first year was only 6 months because we started in July of 2004. And the first book that came out was my book, Change of Pace, which was a collection of short stories. But the next year, Kim joined and Jane Fletcher and Gunn Brooke and Ronnie and Mary Shannon. Um, Trying to think who else might have been in that first year. And all those authors are still here, which is very exciting.
It really is. It's awesome. Um, so your 20th year is coming up,
That is true. This July.
and how are you going to celebrate?
I don't know. I haven't actually thought about it. I mean, honestly, I don't have anything planned. I think it's a milestone for sure, but I didn't think much of it when year 10 went by, and when year 30 comes, I probably won't think too much of it then either. It's just I'm glad that we're still here. I'm glad that we're still bringing these books to our readers and that the readers are still here. So for me, I celebrate every day
Yeah.
that we're here and still reaching readers.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. I can't believe it's 20 years. That's just
I know. Me neither.
that's fantastic. So, how is writing the Midnight Hunter series different than writing like more of your contemporary romance novels? And
Well, I
like,
think you can't compare a series to a standalone novel because regardless of whether it's paranormal or not, a series is completely different than a standalone.
mhm.
The dynamics are always different, and you build them in a different way. If you plan the series, I have to confess that some of my series were not planned that way, which tends to not be the best way to do it. But if you take the Honor series, for example, that was one of my first books published, and I had no intention of making that a series. I was a firm believer, and I'm sure someone can quote me as having said you can't serialize romances. But in fact, you can, but not, it's different. The dynamic is different than what you anticipate. When you do a romance, quote unquote, series, you have to make a decision. Will you continue those initial characters in each book? So it's a continuing story about them. Or will it be a series that has new romances in each book and those original characters still show up? I think that if you want to write romances, you have to do it the second way. Each new book needs to be a standalone. Otherwise, you're basically just telling the story of two characters, and they're really sequels, and it's not really a series. And honestly, I think that readers lose interest pretty fast when you only concentrate on a couple, because so many readers are captured and motivated to read by the emotional adventures and experiences of the new couple. And that's what a romance is all about. So I think that if you're writing a series, you have to decide up front how you're going to frame the series. And the Midnight Hunt series is basically there's a new romance in every book. The main characters occur and usually have a supporting role from the earlier books because it's the same world. So it's the world that unites the series, and it's the challenges in that world. And in particular, in the Midnight Hunt series, the challenge is how do minority groups survive in a world that basically wants to destroy them? And that's the theme of this series. And it's all about the freedom to live and build your own society in a world that has a larger society that's bigger and more powerful than you are. Um,
So true to life.
yeah, I mean, I think that that's the carryover into the real world, our world. But I think that I've tried to make the stories fun and certainly erotic. The Hunt series is very erotic in terms of the sexuality of the characters and how much sex is actually in the books. And that was intentional. I wanted to write a paranormal romance series because I wanted to write a lot of sex, and I wanted to have it in a world where sex was integrated into the overt social customs of the individuals, the creatures, the beings that I was writing about. And certainly werewolves is a great example, vampires too.
I
Um,
think I think our listeners are like hitting up your website and Amazon right now.
well, I hope so. So yeah, there's a lot of sex. Um, but in this particular in my paranormal romance series, sex is a vehicle of expression for the characters. And so that's why there's a lot of sex. It has purpose, I hope, but it's also fun. So that was a big difference. I mean, the sexual elements in the paranormal series is different than most of my other romance series. Certainly the characters, whenever I write romances, I always write sex. I think that for me, in my romance works, sexual expression is an important element of the connection between the main characters, not just their emotional connection, but for me, expressing how they feel about each other sexually is very important. So, I mean, there's sex in all of my books. Um, so that's the same. The degree is slightly different in the paranormal series. And the paranormal series is harder because it's a different universe. The world is different. It has to be different. The rules of conduct have to be different. You can't just take a vampire and put them in downtown Albany and write a book. Albany features in my books because they all live here in the Adirondacks, but it has to be a different world. It has to be different politically and different socially, and the individuals in your books have to have different laws and different rules, and so that's a lot harder than just writing. I'm going to write a book in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not Kentucky because I don't know it very well, but in the world we live in, the
Yeah.
setting is a given,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah. You have to
So,
be much more creative and
yeah,
imaginative.
it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
I put off writing a paranormal for a long time, even though I read a lot of fantasy and always have, and I read a lot of science fiction and always have, and I'd never try writing science fiction. I don't have the mind for it. I don't have the technical imagination to write science fiction.
Yeah.
But fantasy was easier. But I put it off because it's really hard.
Yeah.
My head is off to all the successful, fantasy and paranormal authors because it's very hard work.
Have you ever
Uh,
read T.J. Klune?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it just sometimes the imagination of some of the authors that I read astound me, and I
I
think,
know.
oh, I'm a pretender. Um,
Not at all. Not at all. You do well.
um, so I don't know. I think that's the difference. I think is the world building is the big difference between the series. Otherwise, not so much. My series tend to always have a new romance because I think that there are romance readers who prefer a new romance because that's what they really want to read. We have certainly seen, and it's been proven, it's been shown time and time and time and time again that all series sales fall off. People get tired. There's a lot of stuff out there to read. So that if you're going to write a series, you're going to need to keep as much interest in the series as you can because it's a natural decline in sales from book to book to book to book. It doesn't matter who's writing it. I mean, I've done the numbers. I've done it a million times. I have lots of authors writing series, and the way I think to keep the interest for the greatest number of readers is to have a new romance in each book.
Yeah.
So a lot of my series tend to be setting united. The Provincetown Tales, even Above All Honor, is really set in Washington with the political intrigue, and the Justice series is set in Philadelphia. And there are new romances. Yeah. So, anyways, that's how I do my series pretty much the same way. And the new series I'm writing with Julie Cannon, same way.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I read the first one. That was great. That was
Thanks.
awesome.
Thank
Um,
you. I'll let Julie know that, she'll be happy to hear it.
yeah, yeah, it was wonderful.
So,
And
so, I
what
mean,
was the title? Was Summer in it?
Fire in the Sky.
Fire in the Sky. That was it. Summer.
Fire in the Sky. It came out in December 2023. Um, and we deliberately talked about what we wanted to do when we tried this experiment together. And we decided to set it in the Southwest because Julie's from the Southwest. So that gives us a leg up on setting. I had visited the Southwest a couple of times, so I was familiar enough with it that I would feel comfortable with that setting. And there was a tremendous amount of potential for to have a setting that would basically unite the various books in the series, because we knew that we wanted to have some kind of focal, ongoing something or other that we could bring new characters into, and we settled on this dude ranch that would then become the focus for ongoing stories. So
Yeah, that was
yeah,
great. And
yeah.
I
So
love just the drive up to the ranch. Like I could
yeah,
just envision it. Like it was really.
yeah. I think the setting is really powerful in this particular series, because it's a beautiful part of the country, but it embodies, I think, something very wild and primal and erotic,
Yeah.
which I think works really well. Julie and I both tend to be more on the erotic end of the romance spectrum. I mean, we don't necessarily write erotic romances, but our works, we have a similar voice,
Hmm.
which is why we work well together.
Yep. Yep. That's why I like you both.
Yeah,
So.
good.
So, and how do you think your readership varies between like a contemporary romance and um, fantasy?
Well, I think contemporary romance is far and away, standalone contemporary romance is far and away the most popular genre, period. Romantic intrigue, a very close second. I think that those are the two most popular in terms of volume of readership. That is not to say that mysteries or science fiction or erotic romance don't have devoted followers, because they do. But if you look at our publishing industry and you look at the reading, fiction reading world at large, I think those are probably the two most popular. I think that if you then look at contemporary romance series or romantic intrigue series, they're going to have probably 70 or 80% of the following, probably, for the series. Um, I knew, or I anticipated when I wrote my first paranormal romance, that I would lose readers. Um, and I thought a lot about how I was going to handle that, because readers become very invested in authors. Thank you, readers out there who do that. And I think that's really important. And I think we as authors have an obligation to be straightforward and forthcoming about what we're offering. And I knew that if I published this paranormal romance, especially the way it was, which was very, very wild and very erotic, and some of my readers were going to hate it. And I didn't want that to happen. And that's why I picked the pseudonym L.L. Rand, because the spelling puts the books right in front of Radclyffe on the shelf in a
Ah,
bookstore.
that's ingenious.
Well, that's my business. Um, and I said on the cover, and it carries on all the covers, Radclyffe writing as, so that anybody who saw the book would think, oh, I like her, and maybe look at it and think, oh, I'll read this. And people who didn't know me would see a paranormal book and think, oh, this sounds like a good paranormal book. Maybe I'll read it. So I felt that that was the right way to go about it, so that I would not have readers who were going to be disappointed because, and I have plenty of readers, some of my most devoted readers who said, I'm not reading it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I'm not reading it.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. I would say my sales for the first 5 years were 30% less for my
Wow.
parents.
Really?
And I knew that was going to happen. But interestingly, now they've been out for 15 years and the sales are the same.
Hmm.
It just took a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the same. I suspect that it is, there's a Venn diagram overlap. There's one circle
Yeah.
that's just contemporary readers and another circle that loves paranormal and isn't so crazy about just contemporary romance. And then there's the part where they overlap, where readers are reading both.
Yeah.
Um, I suspect that the greatest number of readers who are reading the paranormal series are my romance readers. And then there's going to be a smaller subset of paranormal readers who don't really care about romance, but are looking for the world building, particularly the sex and the eroticism. I mean, I get a lot of people and they're commenting mostly on the sex.
Really?
Uh, yeah, and I think I don't know how many of the readers are queer or not queer,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it crosses over quite a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah. That makes sense. That really does.
Yeah.
Um, I thought of that author's name. It's Jillian.
Oh, Jill McKnight?
Yes. No, no.
Okay.
No, not Joe McKnight. Is it Joe McKnight? It might be. Does she write?
Yes, she
Okay.
does.
Then
She writes, she has written Indigo Moon. She's written probably 5 werewolf stories.
that's probably her then.
Jill
Yeah.
McKnight.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't seen any new work from her in a while.
She hasn't written any more in that series in quite a long time, but it's still, I think there's 5 books, and I just brought them all out in audio probably within the last 2 or 3 years
Oh,
because interestingly, the paranormals do pretty well in audio.
do they really?
So that's really, I'm really pleased about that.
Wow. Wow. So people not only like to
Penningtons
to
too,
yeah. Yeah. Huh.
even though they were all probably 10 years old. And
Yeah.
so that's really nice that you can revitalize some of them.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I know that you mentioned your P Town series and Honor series and the Justice series. Like, do you have any new books or ideas for new books in any of those series?
Um, I'm sort of I took care to try to write the last books in each of my series so that they would kind of be ended if I didn't write anymore.
Yeah.
But I've always left a little bit open. There's plenty of openings for all of those. And every, 3 or 4 years, I get the urge
Yeah.
to write another one. That's what happened with Primal Hunt. I haven't written anything in that series for probably 3 years or so, maybe 4 years. And I just thought, I definitely had left it dangling. That one was really dangling. So after Enchanted Hunt, so I really needed to have an ending. But
Mm.
I knew it was going to be big. It was going to be a big canvas and a big book, and I had to get a lot of energy up to write it. So right now, I don't have any other plans. I'm working right now on the next book with Julie Cannon, which is called Wildfire. And that will be out in time for Provincetown for Women's Week. Should be out for Women's Week this year.
Awesome.
And then I'm thinking that I may write a kind of spin-off sequel, not really series, not really sequel, more a spin-off to Only This Summer, which is set in the Adirondacks.
I like that one too.
I have a character in that book. You may not, if you haven't read it, you won't know, and you may not remember if you have read it. Natalie, who's one of the forest rangers, and she first appeared in When Dreams Tremble, which is also set on Lake George. So that,
Really?
yes.
I
And
don't
I
remember
always
that.
intended to write her romance, and I never did. And I brought her back as a secondary character in this book. And then I'm thinking that I'm going to write a story with her as the in one of the romantic pair.
Great. I do not remember her from when Dreams
Yep.
Tremble. How
Yep.
about that? That's so
Yep.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love how you do that. And well,
That's been in my head for probably, I don't know, 16, 17
I
years
would
that I
have
have to
forgotten by now.
I have to get back to Natalie.
That's great. I'm sure Natalie appreciates it, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
And since I don't timestamp my books ever,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. I mean, you could read three in a row and they'd be like 4 or 5 years apart in story time.
Yeah.
So I don't generally write in real time in the books.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just sometime. Yeah.
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 That's great. Um, so since you're celebrating your 20th anniversary of Bold Strokes Books, let's talk a little bit about the publishing company.
Hmm.
And when you first like thought about having a publishing company, is this what you imagined?
No, I didn't. I mean, I really, well, there were models out there. I mean, you're going back more than 20 years now. Now you're going back to the year 2000, probably, which is when I first became involved in publishing. Because my books were already in the process of being published in 2000,
Okay.
because I had signed contracts with a couple of small POD presses. And so, I've been involved in the publishing aspect of queer fiction since the 2000, maybe
Okay.
just a little bit before that. Um, and the models that existed were relatively narrow and limited at that time. Um, and it was both good and it was both a great time and, not such a great time in that the POD presses allowed more lesbian voices in particular, because that's really, they were mostly lesbian presses. Some of the guys did have gay presses at the same time. A couple of them are still around too. But what it allowed was publishers to be able to get print books without investing a lot of money in stock.
Hmm.
The problem was that mainstream bookstores or almost any bookstores wouldn't carry the books because they couldn't get them, quote unquote, easily.
Yeah.
And I went through this with a very noted bookseller in Provincetown when I went there in probably 2004, 2005, and I had a couple of really top-selling books, and they didn't carry them. And I asked them if they could carry it, and they basically said, "Well, we can't order it." And the problem was the ordering systems were separate, so that to order a POD book was not the same as ordering a book from a distributor that kept stacks of the books in a warehouse and stuck them on a truck.
Yeah.
That problem has been pretty much alleviated 20 years later, but it's still not a smooth process. So when I started Bold Strokes Books, I really knew some things about publishing because I had experience publishing by then with that model. And I had also done a very short, probably 18-month period of time when I and another individual who worked for a printer joined forces and created Starcross Productions. And I don't know if you remember that way back when. You may not even remember it.
No.
But basically, her printer where she worked was printing the books that I was writing, and we were distributing them, selling them together, in partnership. And that was really interesting because, again, we could get good market on Amazon, but we couldn't get books anywhere else. Amazon was there since the late 90s.
Yeah.
So that was an outlet for those kinds of models, but it was still very limited. So when I decided to form Bold Strokes Books, the very first thing I did was start to look into mainstream distribution models because that was the choke point. That was what was keeping sales at a certain level that we couldn't get beyond because we couldn't get into the mainstream distribution channels. Um, and very fortunately, serendipitously, Linda Hill had just created Bella Distribution, which is the distribution arm of her endeavors, separate from her publishing company. Um, and she was looking for publishers to distribute. And we ended up at a meeting together in Washington, D.C., and started talking. And that's how Bella basically umbrellaed Bold Strokes into the distribution channel so that from the very beginning, we got into mainstream distribution. So that now we have two arms of distribution. Bella still distributes us mostly to small local bookstores, and we have mainstream distribution through Ingram.
Wow.
Um,
It's a
and
win-win for both of you then.
yeah, it really was. It's been a great partnership, and we're still really good friends, and our businesses go along on their own avenues. Um, but smart, it was very smart business. And I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I didn't really know how big it would grow. I knew what my vision was for what we would publish and how we would publish it and what the emphasis of the publishing company would be on. And that has not changed. I mean, I wanted to publish a wide variety of books. I didn't want to just be a romance publisher. I didn't long term want to just be a lesbian publisher. I wanted to be a queer publisher. It took time to do that. I was in business for 5 years, I think, before we started publishing any gay works. And then we started publishing YA because these are completely different audiences, different sales channels, different everything. Yes, they're queer, but they're very separate avenues of sale. So that took time to sort of broaden our horizons. I put a big emphasis on acquiring good editors, and the editors are still with us too.
That's wonderful.
Almost all the editors that we've had literally have been here for 15 years or more.
Wow.
I think if you're going to be a publisher, well, what does that mean? What do you offer? What do you bring an author? And for me, it's several things. You bring them audience. You bring them access to readership. You bring them editors to create quality work. You bring them information about how to market their works, but you also give them tools to be better authors over time. And the only thing I can say is look at our authors and ask yourself, is that true? Yeah. Is that true for the Bold Strokes Books authors? And I think that you will have to say yes.
Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. And that is really unusual for a company to maintain editors for that long. Like usually editors will hop around, and again, it speaks well to you as the head of the company, but it also is really good for your readership because those editors, they know what your readers want, and they know your authors, so they could probably edit a book lickety split and deliver you what you want.
Yeah, I think that that's all of those things are true. I think that just like authors, editors evolve as well.
Yeah.
In terms of our editors have a great appreciation of the marketplace. And I think that that's very important. Yeah. I mean, marketplace, really understanding how we are creating products. That's something that people don't really want to hear, but it's the truth. Yes, we are artists. Yes, we are creative, But if you want to sell your books, you have to pay attention to the marketplace as well. You have to ask yourself, what is the audience looking for?
Mm-hmm.
What are they reading? What don't they read? What do they like? What don't they like? And you don't necessarily have to, well, you don't ever have to limit what you create, but you have to create with a mind towards the end product and who's going to read this book.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're someone who's happy if 5 people read your book, that's great, but you probably don't want to be published because it's probably not going to be worth the effort. There are other ways to get your books to those 5 people.
True, true. So, how many people do you think from the time, let's say, someone sends in a manuscript, until the time it is, you know,
Comes
ready?
out the door.
Yeah. How many
All right.
people at Bold Strokes have kind of
Watch
touched?
it.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes in, I am the selections director. We have a selections coordinator. We see the first email that hits. And if we decide to review it, we have anywhere between, depending on how busy everybody is, between 2 to 4 or 5 what I call experienced readers, who are basically people, readers, who have read a lot and have an interest in reading submissions and giving their opinion. So probably, and then I will usually have another editor look at anything I'm seriously considering taking to publish.
Okay.
So probably, let's say 6 people see it before it's actually accepted. Then Sandy, our senior editor, will handle the communication, the contract negotiations with the author.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another person.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the contract is signed, then the graphic artist will get involved. Ruth Sternglantz, who is our marketing consultant, will talk to them about social media. Cindy Cressup is the production manager, who will eventually give them their deadlines, not their editorial deadlines, but when they need to have things in, like back matter, front matter.
We're up to 10.
Are we? Okay. Proofreaders, usually at least 2. Oh, typesetting. So once the editor, and the editor, obviously, 1 to 2 editors.
Okay.
So that's 12.
Yep.
And then from editing to typesetting, so that's 13. Tony Whitaker does all of our ebook conversion. So the ebook tech has to handle it.
Okay.
And the proofreaders at the end.
Okay.
So I would say probably at least 15 people.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of moving parts, and it's all going on simultaneously for 100 books, because we publish 100 to 120 new titles a year.
Wow.
So there's no downtime.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no gaps in the system.
Yeah.
So, we try very hard to hold to deadlines. I mean, obviously things happen.
Yeah.
Life happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes books have to get shuffled for everybody, for, the authors, the editors, everybody has lives where things happen. And sometimes there are delays, but in general, it's a very smooth running machine. And it's a very rare for us not to be able to get a book out on time, or sometimes we might have to push a month, if there's been a problem. And we try not to crowd the editorial process, because I think that's really important for the editors or for the authors. And obviously the editors, they're editing more than one book all the time too.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty complicated, and there's a lot of spreadsheets involved and a lot of people involved.
Yeah. And it makes sense that you put out such a good product, because you have so many people scrutinizing the product before it hits the market,
Yeah, I mean, even when Tony does the ebook conversion, and this has been, read by a couple of editors, read again by the author, read by the typesetter. And Tony, will frequently find a typo when she's doing the ebook conversion. Yeah. I mean, and she has her own little crew. I don't know how many people she has that actually because the ebooks are completely different in terms of how they're formatted and how the flow is, and they may be different on different readers. And Tony is very particular about the quality of the ebooks.
Yeah.
So, she's got her own crew that looks at them, and sometimes they'll find something that we didn't find.
Yeah, yeah, it's incredible. That's a
Yeah.
lot. That's a lot of work that goes into just one book, and to think
I
about,
know. Just
yeah.
one book. And we didn't talk about audio.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for probably 25 to 30% of the books right away will go to audio. Um, and I do all of the audio production in-house, and I supervise that myself in terms of choosing the titles, choosing the narrators, working with the narrators, working with our proofers who audio proof the files, who literally listen to them before they are approved for production.
Wow.
Entirely new arm
Yeah.
that I started in 2018, I think. We have
Wow.
over 465 of our own audiobooks produced so far.
That's incredible. That's great. That is really wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so that's a whole other, bunch of people that touch the product.
Yeah. I mean, it really does. It's no, it's like a no brainer. No wonder like you produce such great work, and um,
We
but
have a lot of dedicated people. All of our people are incredibly dedicated. And, you know, all of them could go somewhere else and earn more money.
yeah,
They do this because they care about the readers, they care about the product, they care about the queer community.
yeah,
Um, th I am successful because they are successful, because they are so good and so supportive.
yeah, yeah. So speaking of the community, what kind of impact do you think that Bold Strokes has had on the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, I think that every single one of our authors has gotten emails from readers. And I think that every single voice, every person that we touch with one of our books, for whom it means something, either in the reading or maybe after, when they think about, they feel better because they know that other people have experienced what they experience, and they're not alone in the world. I mean, I think that creating ties, creating the sense of being connected to others is the gift that we bring with our books. And the more that we publish and the more readers that we reach, we will make a difference in some of those individuals' lives. And maybe it's just for the period of time that they read the book, and they feel like, I have felt that, and it's okay that I did.
Yeah,
I have done that, and it's okay that I did. And that there are others like me. I think that that's so important in our community, is creating a sense of wholeness and affirming that who we are and what we feel and how we express our feelings and our love is critically important. And I think that our books are one way that we do that. And I think that's what we do as publishers and authors.
yeah, yeah. There's, I don't think anything more lonely than being part of a marginalized group and feeling alone and feeling like you're the only one. And I think those books like bring a whole world to people.
I just got an email just the other day from someone at university who saw the film that I was in, Love Beneath the Covers,
Yeah.
um, and had told me that she had had no idea that there was lesbian fiction before seeing this film, and that had changed her life.
That's
And
wonderful.
this is not someone who is living in a small rural town in a community where there's no bookstores.
Yeah.
And I think that every piece of whatever we create, whether it's an audiobook or whether it's a film or whether it's an ebook or a print book, every bit of ourselves that we can get out there for others to find, to discover, to relate to, that's a triumph.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen it in, the when I worked with the college age population, they were like, what is this? This is
Yeah,
awesome. They never heard of, LGBT books. They were like, what?
I know.
Yeah. So what do you think is a really underappreciated novel? It could be one of yours, like one of, yours, one of Bold Strokes, or just any novel in the world.
Wow. Did you ask me this ahead of time?
I
That's a
did.
You did. Oh no, that's a tough question.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is. I don't even know where that
the
came from.
problem
My
is,
my head.
yeah, the problem is I mean,
There's so
I can
many.
speak I can speak for myself. I can say that, for my own books, not all of my books are as popular as the others, and it's kind of interesting because the ones that I think were really good, or one of my editors actually said, this is, one of the best books you've ever written is Secrets in the Stone, which wasn't super popular, and I loved it. So for myself, I would say that.
Yeah,
I would say, um,
that's a good one.
yeah, it's funny. I don't know why. I think I do know why actually, but I'm not going to say why because it might prejudice readers. But
Okay.
I do know why it was a little bit more difficult for some readers to identify with. Um, I don't know that I can pick anyone else's work. Um, I think that there are authors who write books that readers don't try because they think they don't like the genre.
Yeah.
I think that the historical fiction writers suffer from that a lot. Um, and I think that those are some of the best written books and exciting books.
Yeah.
Um, Elaine Sutherland comes to mind, whose works are excellent.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that I think it would be nice if readers took a chance sometimes and tried a book that's outside their norm. From a good author, maybe read the reviews. Like on our website, we have reviews, and maybe if it's well reviewed,
Yeah.
it might be worth giving it a shot.
Yeah.
I think that there are certainly authors that we publish who are underappreciated because they're not writing the conventionally popular genres.
Yeah.
And I think the science fiction writers suffer from that. I think the historical romance authors also suffer from that, in that they're not as popular genres, so readers think, oh, I won't like that. And I bet if they tried a couple, they would.
I'm thinking I can't remember her name. I'm so bad with names. It was she wrote a book not too long ago about Gettysburg. Um she's one of your authors. Um but that was great. It was a historical fiction. Um
We have a couple.
yeah, it was one.
Not Frizz.
It
Wasn't
was
Frizz.
Frizz. Yeah.
Okay, it was Frizz.
It was
Okay.
Frizz. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. The title escapes me at the moment,
Yeah.
but Frizzell, if
Yep.
somebody wanted to look her up on the web store, if that's, an area of interest.
Yeah.
So that'd be my answer to that question, I think.
Yeah. And right now I'm reading Horse. Have you seen that book? It's out. It's by just looking at the author, Geraldine Brooks. Um
I haven't.
and it's a historical fiction that goes back and forth in time, about the same horse, like back in
Huh.
like a pre-Civil War, Civil War, and then in like modern time at the museum. So it's really good, really good. I'm probably 3/4 of the way through. So it's awesome. I highly recommend it. Yeah. So are you reading anything right now?
I just finished a fantasy series, and I'm not reading anything right now because I am deep into revising this manuscript and I'm on deadline. So I don't usually read when I'm really writing a lot because I don't have enough hours in the day.
What? Come on. You're such a slacker, Rad. I think you work so hard. I don't know how you do all you do in one year. Like, really.
I tend to read very long fantasy novels. And then
Okay.
sometimes I have well, I love John Sanford, who writes the Prey novels, and
Mm-hmm.
he just had one out, and I read it in 2 days.
Wow.
But, I hate when I do that because then it's over and there won't be another one for a year.
Yeah.
But I tend to read very long fantasy novels. So they take a long time to read. And then when I'm into them, I want to read them all the time. And I can't do that if I have to write.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
uh,
rough.
being
Yeah.
very disciplined right now.
Yeah. So is there a topic that you've always wanted to write about, um, and or include in one of your novels that you haven't yet? And
Um, I've always actually really wanted to write a space opera because I like space operas and I like battles in space. And I like writing about other worlds and other peoples. Um, but I just, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have the technical acumen to do it. I don't have the technical imagination to write spacey type stuff.
yeah.
So that's one thing that I always wished I read it and I really like it a lot. I just read a couple by Anne Leckie just recently that are fabulous. And I mean, when you read her, it's like, okay, well, I could never write this. Um, so that's kind of an area that I would like to write. Topics, they come to me as the world changes.
Yep.
I mean, things that I see in the world that interest me, or I've recently really gotten into birds, um, and I'm really interested in the Adirondacks right now, in the mountains, and that's why I wrote that Only This Summer, which is set, very close to where I live in the Adirondacks. So I tend to write books that are themed from topics that interest me currently.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a little wingnut question here.
Okay.
If you could be a ship's captain
Yeah.
or an undertaker or a newscaster, what would you choose as your career and why?
Oh, no question. I would be a ship's captain, but I would do it a long time ago, like with sails. I'd be a sailing ship captain,
Okay.
uh, because I think that the adventure and the risk and the danger would make it really exciting, and I would get to see new worlds, um, and eat a lot of oranges.
That's great. All right. So no cowboy for you, but that wasn't an option.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you had said cowboy, I probably would have said it. Although after I kind of like, I got my cowboy needs out in my writing early on. I mean, that was literally like the second thing I wrote was Innocent Hearts, so I could write a cowboy. So probably I'm okay there.
There you go. There's your next novel, Ship's Captain.
Yeah.
All right. So we are winding down with time here, but I just want to mention um, Only This Summer, which
Mhm.
is available through Bold Strokes or wherever you buy your books, which is an awesome book. And then your book Fire in the Sky that
Yes.
came out in December of just last year, so just four
Yep.
months ago.
It's a
Uh,
Goldie finalist this year.
awesome. Congratulations.
To Julie and me, yes, thank you.
Yeah. And the sequel, Wildfire, will be out in time for Women's Week in October.
Correct.
And then coming
Primal
out
Hunt.
in May is Primal Hunt
Yep.
under the name LL Rand,
Correct.
so AKA Radclyffe. So, Rad, do you have any parting words for our listeners today?
Yeah, just a big thanks. I mean, to everyone who listens, who spreads the word, who reads a book, who recommends it to a friend. You are the ones that keep us all going. So we are all at Bold Strokes, and I personally very grateful. And thank you, Anita, for doing this because you spread the word as well.
Yep, I love talking to you all. So, thank you. Thanks for writing. Keep writing.
All right, thanks.
Yes. So that's all the time we have for today. I'm Anita Kelly, and thanks again to Radclyffe for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for joining Liz talk about books, baby. And until next time, may your journey be lighthearted, peace be plenty, and be safe out there, folks.